Hello and welcome. I'm Christine Perret, your host today for today's IEEE hosted Google Hangout on the topic of Open and Interoperable Augmented Reality and to advance open augmented reality through consensus-based standards. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure this is going to be a very engaging and interesting discussion. We're going to talk about application programming, protocols, and data formats within the standards bodies and their use in commercial AR solutions. So that's a strategy that people can adopt today for open and interoperable augmented reality. This session is this part of a series of webinars and hangouts called Augmented Reality in Your Future. Yesterday, November 13th, I presented a webinar on the topic of open and interoperable augmented reality. I introduced the work of 5 standards development organizations during that webinar, and I explained what they and their members are doing to reduce the reliance on closed proprietary technology solutions. I described how standards development organizations' specifications are part of a matrix of strategies available to the developers of AR experiences and tools. The November 13th webinar set the stage for today's Hangout and is now available on demand on the IEEE AR in Your Future webpage. In today's episode, we'll meet people that work closely with others to develop new standards and combine and extend existing standards to meet the requirements of new AR use cases. They'll share with us the insights about the role of standards in augmented reality. These people have agreed to spend this hour with us to help you select or contribute to standards that may be relevant to your work. You'll hear their views on what the future holds for open and interoperable augmented reality. At the end of the hour, we'll take your questions. If you have a question or any comments, please join the conversation by tweeting to us using the hashtag IEEE-AR, IEEE-AR. Now let's go ahead and get started with some introductions. Jay Iorio is the Director of Innovation at the IEEE Standards Association. Jay's interests cover both virtual and augmented reality. He built and manages the IEEE Island Complex in Second Life and is an Oculus Rift developer. In his pre-standards incubation role, Jay builds cross-disciplinary communities of technologists, artists, filmmakers, and game makers that help define the interoperability needs that will lead to the development of standards. Terry Idle is Executive Director of the Open Geospatial Consortium Interoperability Program. He's been involved in standards development as a member of the Critical Infrastructure Program Protection Initiative and has been active in standards since the beginning of the 2000s. Terry's background is in geospatial data and remote sensing technologies. Neil Trevitt is the Vice President of Mobile Ecosystem in the Tegra Group at NVIDIA, and he's the President of the Kronos Group. He's been in the 3D graphics industry for over 25 years, and over that time has been involved in many projects to reduce barriers to the adoption of 3D content, including initiating the OpenGL-ES graphic standards in Kronos that's now shipping in over 1 billion mobile phones a year. That's a lot of devices. Neil serves on advisory boards in several industry groups and also chairs the Kronos OpenCL Working Group for Heterogeneous Parallel Programming. Marius Preda is Associate Professor at Institut Mines Telecom in Paris and is the chairman of the 3D Graphics Group in the ISO Motion Picture Experts Group, IMPEG. He contributes to and is the editor of ISO standards with technologies in the fields of 3D graphics, virtual worlds, and augmented reality. So we've gathered for you here today 4 leading authorities on the subject of standardization. They've seen what works and what doesn't. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to get us started today by asking you to share with us a little about use cases. Use cases are really important in the development of standardization, and if there are very relevant use cases for AR-assisted visualization, which ones do you prefer? Are there any that can't be built using existing standards? Neil, would you please begin and tell us what you think about use cases?
Sure. Hey, Christine, and thanks for the opportunity to be on the call here today. So use cases are really the foundation for whatever a standardization group does. It's really important that any standardization activity isn't done in a vacuum. It's done trying to address real-world market issues and problems. But it's also, I think, important not to look too far out into the future. It's important, I think, to do refinement by standardization committee, not design by standardization committee. So we're really looking for problems that need a solution, like here, now, today, and research by standardization committees. So worst of all, I think you can really go off into the weeds if you try to look too far into the future. Kronos, we are looking for the friction points in markets where if the software developers are getting problems in trying to access acceleration hardware, that's where we laser-like focus on and say, okay, how can we solve this problem for our members and the greater community?
Okay, great. Terry, who does the OGC focus on, and what are the best use cases for the specifications that develop there?
First of all, it's great to be here, and thank you for inviting us. I think this answer actually kind of flows into what was just said. The OGC standards are developed by technology users and providers who come together in working groups to document interoperability use cases. So it really brings both communities together. And then they develop the standards that provided the needed interoperability. So really the entire community works together to provide the use cases. The use cases don't need to be old. They're widely recognized use cases. They can work to anticipate the markets and the future innovations. The OGC Augmented the OGC AR markup language 2.0 standards working group is a really good example of where the communities come together to work on a use case that really brings the entire community together. Thanks.
Yeah, wasn't the OGC kind of started around the use cases of satellite providers? I think that they were people who were sending data down from space about the Earth, and then needed some standards ways for bringing those into computers.
So when I first started, it was in the early 2000s. By then, we were working on the web map services, which was more of a raster base, and the use cases was that really widely used throughout the. At the time, it wasn't widely used, but now it's kind of the standard that everybody's using. Not just satellite-based, raster-based, vector-based, it's the entire community. So now they're branching out into augmented reality, and I think this is a fascinating area to get into.
Okay, great. Thank you. Marius, what are some of the participants, how do you come up with use cases in MPEG?
Hi everybody. Yeah, indeed, the use case is the starting point. You have first to use some languages that everybody understands, and use case is something that is easy to expose, is easy to make it comprehensible by everybody. So it is a good starting point for making a standard, but is only the starting point, because of course not all the use cases will have the same value for the standard. Even more, there are some use cases for which we already know that standard will not have too much benefit because of competition, because of the other issues not necessarily related to the technical, let's say, capacity of making that use case. So indeed, this is also how MPEG works. Starting from a set of use cases, we are using them to drive the requirements, which is, let's say, the second big stone in creating the standard. So, and it's not only about requirements of the application, of requirements of the technology, but it's also requirements with respect to what the standard in that particular field will bring. So making a standard means that from the beginning, so from the use case stage, you somehow try to assess the impact of what you will do in the standard. So, yes.
What are the use cases that you used when you started to design the augmented reality application format?
Yeah, that is also an interesting point, because you, like any other organization, you have a history, and then you are continuing in that history, and at a certain moment you try to take a kind of turn, and you open new rooms and you find new things. So traditionally so MPEG is about audio and video, and you may say the most classical use case will be entertainment. Let's have some audio-video presentation that everybody is very familiar with. And then it comes the idea, okay, but we don't have only two senses. We have much more than that. We have other senses. So can we put something more in that experience, something that goes to other senses, but even something that involves more the user? Traditionally, you have an audio-video presentation, you watch, you listen, but you don't do too much. But that was tradition probably 20 years ago. Now it changed. You are part of the experience. You are a kind of actor of the experience. And this is where we cross the road with the AR. It's not because one day we wake up saying, oh, AR is fun, let's do AR. But it's because it's a natural continuation of audio-visual kind of presentation, adding graphics, then adding interaction, then adding the user, and doing all this in real time by considering the context where the user is, let's say, another definition of AR.
Right. Well, we can come back to those definitions if we need to, if we have to. Jay, are you involved in standards? The IEEE has so many different vertical markets and industries, so diverse. How do people converge towards one use case?
We're just working on that now, actually. There are, you got it. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's good to hear from everybody. And there's some very good points made by my co-panelists. Because of the IEEE's nature, I mean, in effect, it's almost anything that involves electricity. You've got a very broad thing that goes from medical to, well, anything, and so that is a challenge to try to focus it on the most compelling use cases. And if that isn't hard enough, my particular role is to look at the eventual integration of this with a variety of other technologies that are in similar places that may or may not be ready for standardization. And in order for that to have anything but conversational use, it really requires an interoperability mentality so that everything can connect to everything in ways that we might not predict. So the use cases can get very complex in a way when you start to look at the entire picture, I think, over the next several years.
Sure, it does get complicated, and I see a lot. Anybody want to comment on what Jay said, or what another one? Does anybody want to sort of come back or clarify? And no, okay.
So, what Marie said, I think it was very well stated. The one thing I would like to add is the geospatial aspect of that, because everything he said was absolutely correct. And just add in the geospatial aspect of that with the audiovisual part and adding in where things happen. That's one thing that people tend to forget to add in, and I just want to make sure we add that in. Thanks, and Maurice, great job in that definition.
Okay. I guess I'd like to push a little farther. What's your favorite augmented reality use case? Neil, is there something where, let me just preface this by saying, don't say augmented reality like Google Glass. Say something else.
I wasn't going to say that, but I think well, it's not really a use case. I guess it's more of a platform, if I can stretch the question that way. It's I mean, obviously there's a lot of innovation right now. The main innovation vector in many places in the electronics industries, mobile devices, and augmented reality by its very nature, it needs a mobile device. You want to be mobile and walking around, engaging your environment and other users. So there's a lot of I think synergy between a lot of the developments and investment in the mobile platform that's happening kind of independent of augmented reality. And I do agree with Marius too. It's an extension of all those things that are going on in mobile devices and the wider industry that's going to enable this kind of richer interaction with other people and the environment that is the essence of augmented reality. But you know, games on a mobile phone, it's really interesting, and it's kind of an interesting kind of use case, and people are learning a lot, and you know, there will be some interesting games, but augmented reality is much more than just games on a mobile phone. That's just the very first wave of the innovation we're going to see.
Well, I can see that Marius is just itching to come back at you, but I'm going to actually ask him to actually transition a little bit to the next topic, which was the use of existing standards and extending those existing standards. Marius, what you described to us for the AR application format is exactly that. It's a repackaging and an extending of a suite of existing technologies. How does that come about? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How do you extend an existing standard? How do developers learn about these extensions, etc.?
Yeah. I think that the happy case is when you can create such extensions. Like it looks natural at some point to, by packaging and probably adapting and do some additions, to target another applications that you never tried before. That is a happy case. And when it goes like that, the good part is that you have already the community that is using the standard, and it will be very easy to deploy the small changes. When you have a completely new standard, of course, it's still possible, and we know successful standards that were built like that. It's only more, you have to have more effort to make it deployable. But also, we are now talking about AR, which is a very nice subject, but is not new once. Will not be the holy grail neither. We will have tomorrow something else, and it's good that now we are focusing on AR. And try to reuse or simply use what we already have to go in that direction. I think if we are defining standards for particular applications, they will die very quickly. The standard is, at least the technology standard, should be defined at a lower level, enabling AR, enabling something that we don't even know that it will exist tomorrow, because the power of the standard is also to answer to requirements that are not yet clear in people's mind, and to by their existence, the users of the standard should invent new applications and new services. That would be a very powerful standard, and yeah, we are trying to do that in MPEG. And I think this is an example. AR is a simple, is an example of how existing standard technologies for media representation, audio, video, for context representation, sensors, actuators, can be put together. And once you have the rest of the chain, that means devices, hardware, good algorithms, recognition algorithms, especially for AR, then you simply create a standard that will target a particular application, as in our case of AR.
Okay. Terry, did you want to add something to that about extending standards, or where do we need to decide? Is there a need for a new standard, entirely new?
Well, coming from the Open Geospatial Consortium, I probably would like to add a few comments, yes. So Maurice had a couple of different points in there that I would like to address. First of all, there are, as he mentioned, a number of standards that tailor and work very nicely with augmented reality. And the Open Geospatial Consortium, and not to blow our own horn, but there's a lot of worldwide standards that are used that can actually help the augmented reality world very nicely, and that's an extension of the existing standards that really can help augmented reality, and that's where I totally agree with Maurice. There's city GML, there's indoor GML, there's a lot of sensor standards that we have currently, and these are of course geospatially based, that really do a great job working with the augmented reality and very much help what's existing. I'm sorry, Maurice, really help the existing standards greatly. The other thing that we are doing is we are developing a candidate OGC augmented reality markup language 2.0 that is totally focused on augmented reality. And I think we have such a wide base of the community that's building on the capability that it actually is marching forward very nicely. It's coming up for a vote for implementation and for passing in December at the technical committee meeting. And
but I think that's an example, honestly, Terry, the ARML 2.0 is an example of a specification that is not as much an extension of other specs. I
correct.
mean, they took some of the parts of KML, then they threw it out, then they came back with some GML rules, and so it's been a lot of compromise in the history of ARML 2.0 specifically.
So when I said there's two parts of his, you're absolutely right. So the first part was there's a lot of existing standards that we can use for augmented reality now, and that was part one. Part two, and thank you for pointing that out, part two is the ARML 2.0 that is marching forward that is specifically for augmented reality. So where he said that there's not necessarily a standard that needs to be created specifically for augmented reality, I think there is one that is being based, and it is being very much manipulated through time, and it's being tailored specifically for what we need now. And will it change over time? Absolutely. As more and more demands and more is understood about what is needed, it will morph over time into what the needs are over time. So I think you're quite right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I think one of the factors that helps a standard evolve over time is if it gets adopted. If it gets embraced, then you have so much more feedback. And I'm thinking a couple of examples. One, I think of the IEEE. There have been examples of very promising specifications. Probably all of you have examples of those that just don't get traction. And then some, like 802 and all of the Wi-Fi specifications, my gosh, you know, where would we be without Wi-Fi and that family of protocols? I don't know if there's are there cases where those standards that die take companies with them? Their entire ecosystems that are built on a standard and then that just get wiped out. Neil, do you know of examples like that?
Well, I definitely agree with your first point that adoption is key. I mean, there's no point creating a standard if no one uses it, and it is surprisingly hard to actually create a standard that does get widespread adoption. It's the exception rather than the rule. I mean, there are lots of initiatives that don't succeed. I think it's a few factors have to come together. Obviously, the standardization activity has to be focused on a real use case that people care about. The work at the technical committee has to be good. It has to really solve the problem in a good way. But there's also some element of luck. You know, is the timing right? Is the political environment right? Are the platform vendors receptive right now or not? And that to a certain extent, is out of the control of the standardization organization. So, opportunity happens when luck meets preparation. And it's good if you can get a standard, because it can really help people. Often, though, if a standard does go down, it's because everyone has gone somewhere else. So, probably the companies that are smart and are figuring out which way the winds are blowing.
In fact, I think specific. One of the things. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think standards bodies are really sensitive to that too. All of the different standards organizations that are represented here have a web-facing strategy. You have the integration, towards the WebGL and WebCL. The OGC has a quite active web-facing strategy. I was surprised as I've studied MPEG over the last year or two, Marius. Even in your in those specifications, I see more and more talk about the web. Can you comment on that trend by any chance?
Yeah, web. Yeah, you are simply saying web, but web is a lot of technology. Is now a kind of aggregation of technology, and is in the same time a set of very good technology. So I hardly see someone that will intentionally ignore what is happening there. So as Neil said some time ago, when I mentioned Neil because it's the first time when I heard this expressed some years ago, when he said that the web is a platform, is the platform. Yeah, there will be a lot of content that will be, let's say, distributed by that channel. I don't know, and probably no one knows, if that will be the unique channel, but I don't think we have to do our strategy and consider it as a unique channel, but for sure is a very important channel. And because our customers are on the other side of that channel, it's very important to consider it in the strategy.
So to summarize there, if I say I want to come back to winners and losers, I'm going to poke at Jay a little bit and ask him to think of winners and losers in the standards process, any examples that you have, who's really dead set against standards. But Marius, just to recap, you're saying the users of the web are the big winners of standardization. We wouldn't be all using the web if the W3C were not as strong in its day. I'm not saying it's weak today, but it's like it was strong for a while, and it really did played such an important role in making us all winners and being able to use the internet in a way we couldn't without the web.
Yeah. For me, the one of the main point of this model is the one that is able to separate the content from the technology. That means once you have the browser, and there are some, and you have a language that can represent, let's say, a very rich experience, even if a rich experience should be understand that can be improved as well. But still, we can consider that the experience we have now on the web is rich. And that was done, so the experience itself is done by people that don't care too much how the browser will render that experience. So separating the way how you create that experience and the way how the end user will use it is one of the main points of what is happening on the web. And the second point is that the system is open. You can do some more with respect to what the system originally planned, and if something works, the W3C are, let's say, open and smart enough to put it in as soon as there is the evidence that is something that will work fine. So I like the model. I like the model.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Jay to chime in about who are the winners and who are the losers in standards and in augmented reality. Maybe you can compare that with virtual reality and what's going on there today.
I think I'm going to sound idealistic, but I think that everybody benefits from standards if they're foundational, open, interoperable. These are characteristics that allow for creativity. And often I'll hear, you know, well, you're trying to stifle innovation and so forth, when actually I make the argument that it's quite the opposite, that in fact standards give you a platform onto which to be creative. So I think the consumer benefits, I think manufacturers, developers, I think everybody benefits. If you invest in proprietary solutions, that's when I suppose you might lose out. But and often that happens. I mean, with VR, for example, there are standards emerging, but it's largely proprietary at this point. It's still very immature. So I'm not expecting to be able to use my Oculus Rift in 5 years. But you know, once the standards develop, it really will benefit everybody.
Okay. Any other comments?
But once the standards exist, you can concentrate on the data instead of on the interchange, and that's really what it's all about. That's what you want to be able to concentrate on. You don't want to get back into the browser wars of the early days of the internet. When you talked about the winners and losers, just look back. If you want to know who the losers are, you're not using those browsers anymore. And for those of us that are old enough to remember the early days of the internet, we remember who those are. We don't have to mention any names. The younger generation doesn't know who they are because they don't exist.
Yeah, I really agree. I think everyone wins with the right standards at the right time in the right place. And it's not just that communities in the ecosystem are agreeing how to communicate to each other. It's putting in an interface that enables parallel innovation. I totally agree with Jay that it's not stifling innovation. If you can have multiple communities innovating at their own rate and agreeing how they're going to communicate to each other, remove those friction points, you can actually get a lot more innovation feeding into the market than if everyone's trying to do everything in their own proprietary stack.
Absolutely.
Let's try to bring this back to augmented reality in some way. So if you have anything else to say about winners and losers, try to bring it into augmented reality.
It all is augmented reality. I mean, this is shaping the future of how augmented reality is being developed. They have to be open standards. They have to be something that everybody can share. And as was stated earlier, these standards are still maturing, and they will continue to mature. Early this year, there was a exposition at one of the an open exposition using ARML 2.0, and they had 3 browsers that were demonstrated, and they had 5 million users, I believe, that participated. So it's early, but still, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of interest in this arena. And using a draft standard at the time, there's still people that are developing and working with it. So open standards that people can access freely, I think, helps benefit where you can actually work on the technology and not worry about what standard you're working against.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Can I say something?
Yes, I thought you might want to.
Yeah, for sure. Because actually there are plenty of in these three words we can probably write books, because it's about standards, it's about openness, it's about freely. So, but not all of them come together, and I am pretty sure that for AR, not all of them will come together. So first of all, standards are good. Being open or freely or not open or not freely are good because they solve a part of the value chain. So if you are not particularly on that part of the value chain, you are very happy that someone else solved your problem. Then, if you really want to bring something more on that particular part of the value chain, you would like that part to be open, because you may have some other needs that are not yet covered, and if they are open, then you may say something. Some companies that are having de facto standard are open enough to listen to their customers and change them. And then there is the question, is this free or is this not free? And that is a huge domain, because sometimes you have the feeling that it's free, but you will realize later on that was free but is not free anymore. So knowing the rules from the beginning, it will help many people to build a business case.
Okay. So I guess I could just speak on behalf of the Open Geospatial Consortium. Our standards are posted on our website, and they're totally open, and they're totally free, and anybody can download them at any time. You could, from where you sit, for any of the geospatial standards that are created, and they're used worldwide. KML is probably a good example of a standard that we have that most people have heard of. Web Map Service, and obviously that's not the purpose of this, but I agree. You need to know the ground rules, and if you say they're open and free, they have to stay open and free.
Well, sure. Yeah, organizations, or let's say that organizations like ours, they have this clearly stated from the beginning. So you know the rules from the beginning. But yeah, I have the feeling that in the AR space today, we are at the beginning of the standardization, meaning that there are a lot of people that will not benefit now from the standard because they believe that AR will be completely different from other technology. So they believe that the proprietary solution will be here for 50 years. But they have the right to believe like that. They build their business model like that today. They will be probably very good companies for some years. But we know, at least the history tell us that it never happened. Even with very successful standards like we had from Adobe Flash, we see that it stays for a while and at a certain moment it dies. But still, there was at least one company that made a lot of good business on that. My only hope is that in AR we will not go there, and the fact that we have this presentation now where we are all representing standard organizations, and we look carefully to these fields, to this application field that is AR, maybe believe that this will not happen again. But for sure, there will be companies that in the field of AR will try to impose what they call standards. They will become, or not standards, but that will be proprietary standards. Probably they will be open with some, let's say, openness. At least there will be APIs because they are smart enough to make APIs. Probably some of them will be free because they will be big companies and will take it for free, do whatever you want. But still, I think that it may work for some time. But we are here behind to tell them, let's try to do it better.
So that's a great place. That's a great place for me to start the next topic, the next question. Suppose I was a person in an IT department in a large corporation, and we had done a lot of piloting, and we have done some augmented reality deployments already. We have invested several years, several $1 million in proprietary technologies. And now, when is the right time to transition to open systems and standards-based solutions? And how does a company transition? How does the ecosystem or the customer make this transition gracefully? Do we have examples of that we could point people towards and encourage them to be thinking about it now and not later? And I'm thinking here, if people could, even if it's a proprietary solution, describe their augmented reality solution using the reference model, that then we could say, well, here, if you change out the rendering, or if you change out how you approach the tracking, then you're going to be incrementally getting closer to that open architecture. Any comments, or who would like to advise me about making a transition from proprietary to a standards-based solution? I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Well, I think you said the key word is incremental, typically. I mean, obviously, different use cases can be different, but I think, just speaking generally, an incremental approach, and a pragmatic incremental approach where if you're an early adopter, inevitably you're probably going to be using some proprietary, because it goes back to our earlier point, whilst the industry is still trying to figure out a problem, and that's not the right time for standards to appear. So in the early phases of a adoption technology curve, you're going to get some proprietary solutions as they figure out what works and what doesn't work. But when it gets boring enough that everyone knows how to do it, and it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. You know, is it more power efficient? Is it better tracking? But the functionality is agreed. That's the right time for the vendors to start using the standards, and for the users to start deploying those standards within their own organizations, so they don't get locked in to proprietary stacks. So it's all a matter of timing, and there's no rule. So I think you have to kind of say, what's going on in my organization right now? Where are the pain points? Let's try and see if the time is right, and try and find an open standard that can help me fix those pain points, and just do it incrementally.
I may try an answer. I think it's a matter of cost at the end of the day. So if you want to make one AR application, let's say, because you are selling furniture and you want to have an AR application, then you don't care too much about how much it will cost you. Of course, it should not cost millions, but you will not make the difference between few thousands of dollars. So probably in that case, you will just want a solution. But then, if you are building something that you will need 2, 3, 10, 100 applications or cases, different cases, then you will have a problem of scale. Of course, someone can develop for you today almost any kind of AR application by using the right SDK. But it will come with a cost. And when people are looking for standard, is when they are looking somehow to reduce the cost. And why the cost is reduced? Because parts of the chain are delivered by someone else that will deliver a big number to allow them to reduce the cost. Today, I have the feeling that in AR domain, we are not yet there. People try to have new applications. They try different things, including proprietary solutions. Some of them may work, but very few of them have a, let's say, AR strategy, communication strategy, or simple usage strategy of AR. We are not yet there, but it will come, and when it will come very fast. So we have, standard organizations, we have to be ready for that moment. We have to be ready to the moment when someone will say, okay, AR is what I need, I know exactly how to use it, but now I want to do it at a reasonable price, and I want to have a lot of customers with the same kind of application. And then they look, they will say, what are the browsers that are outside, what are the tools that are outside, and then they will compare standard solutions between them. But I have the feeling we are not yet there.
That's really important. I want to ask if Jay will share a little bit about what Mario said. Was a lot of this is an educational campaign, and what he's saying is that you need to be singing from that hymn book. Everybody's got to continue to talk about interoperability in augmented reality, so that when the time comes, there's a connection made. Jay, could you talk a little bit about what the IEEE is doing? And this webinar is one example of it. What are the other things that the IEEE is doing?
Sure. Well, we've got a lot of people doing a lot of different things. One of the things that I'm doing is talking to people who traditionally have never really thought in terms of standards. A good example is game developers, and how game developers might integrate with filmmakers and also be the sort of structure for systematizing so-called serious experiences. And even in the built environment. So this is I just described 3 or 4 groups that felt no need for standardization in a sense. They're very siloed attitude, and I'm trying to convince a lot of people, and a lot of people at the IEEE are trying to do this, that that in fact their work is more universal than they might think, and that these silos are going to feed into other things over the next several years, so that we should all be thinking in terms of how you interoperate with other industries, with other technologies, even though you might not necessarily know how that's going to happen, but your intuition tells you that these are ultimately going to get together. So there's an element of standards evangelism, I suppose, where you convince people of the philosophy, and if you get them thinking that way, then you're probably going to have a much more successful integration, more ability to do things spontaneously and so forth in the future. So that's my approach to it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anybody else want to talk about any interchange formats that we want to discuss about? You know, that's one strategy for moving between proprietary silos or between a proprietary technology and an open one is an interchange. We saw hundreds of interchanges. I see, Neil, you've taken your mute button off. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Sorry, Terry. I think it is really important, and it is like such an obvious place where interoperability is needed, because you're going to have different devices and platforms. They're going to be bringing resources from each other and from the cloud, and if you don't agree on what format that data is going to be in, then that's just such an obvious friction point that we can solve with the right standard. And for augmented reality, in many cases, the augmentations are 3D, and 3D is the last of the media types that have really figured out how they're going to be transmitted across the internet. And you know, we've been working with MPEG on this at Kronos. How do you define an efficient 3D asset transmission format? How do you begin to integrate compression so we can, you know, efficiently transmit large assets? I mean, that's something that we're actively working on, and I think that is, you know, one of the most obvious places where we can standardize and add a lot of value to folks.
A couple of points, if I could add on to what Neil said. First of all, Neil, we almost made it through the entire thing without saying the word cloud. Oh, we were so close. I think one of the comments made earlier is if they want to achieve future growth, and to get out of their silos, they will need to move to standards based in order to interact with other organizations and other companies and other data. I think that if they're in a silo, that they will have to do that. I think that's the best argument that's ever made for standards. And you know, I look forward to talking more with IEEE and with Jay, simply for that reason. If you've locked yourself into a silo, you just are in a dead-end position. You can try to force people into your silo. You can do, you know, custom code to try to interact back and forth, but eventually you're going to end up costing too much money. Incrementally is actually, and that was stated earlier, is definitely a good way to go. But what's fascinating to me is, you know, we looked at the browser wars earlier. I mentioned that those actually took years to actually flesh out what were the browsers of success and which ones weren't, what were the losers, what was the winners, as you said earlier, Christine. This is moving very fast. You know, we've been talking about whether or not this will move slowly, how long will it take. You know, I've watched standards over the years, and some of them have taken years to implement. Some of them have moved very quickly. We have one standard that is not in this domain, but I've seen the fastest uptake ever. It moved in less than 4 months, and it's an implemented standard. and it's being widely used already from inception to adoption to implementation. It's just going incredibly quickly. This one seems to be moving very quickly as well. I'm not saying that it's going to continue moving that. I'm talking about the ARML 2.0. I'm not saying it's going to continue moving that fast, but I'm just surprised at how fast it is moving. This field is exploding, and I'm fascinated with it. I'll admit, of the entire panelists, I'm probably the newest one to this. I have much more of a geospatial background, so I think this is going to be moving faster in our area, in the geospatial area, for augmented reality than people are thinking. So that's my take. Back to you.
Anybody else does anyone else think that it's moving quickly, or do you have an opinion? Do you agree or disagree with Terry on this point? Jay, do you think that augmented reality is moving more quickly than virtual reality was 10 years ago?
It is, and now virtual reality is moving quickly. I think once it captures the public imagination, once people start to imagine use cases across society, it starts to pick up remarkably fast.
Right. Okay. Good. Good. Marius, so how about you? Do you think this is, we're wrapping up and we're going to take some questions from the audience. Before we do you think that augmented reality is moving quickly? Is adoption of specifications moving quickly or slowly, in your opinion?
Yeah, it depends where you put your scale. I think that the field itself, I would prefer to move quicker than that. The AR field, yeah, for sure, we are seeing AR applications, AR interest more and more. But still, there is a lot of potential that is not yet discovered. And it may come from the difficulty to use, but if you talk to people that have ideas, communication ideas, or even production ideas, they know very well what they would like to do, but they have the feeling that it's difficult to do. They see things, but they believe, whoa, that was a huge budget to do this kind of application. And us, as a small agency, we cannot allow that. So I think that it can go quicker. But to go quicker, you have to have tools. And now we have relatively good tools for developers. In the market, there are good tools for developers. But there are very few tools for designers, for professional but end users. You still have to be today a kind of programmer. And we have and probably that was also the reason why ARML 2.0, why also RF are good answers to this, because the formalism itself is so powerful that you don't have to program as a designer. You use like HTML, and even there are people creating web pages without even knowing HTML because they have the tools that allow them to create. It should be. But I also think that standards, and going from the low level, that means hardware standard, up to content standard, as RF and ARML, are answers to make it going quicker than it goes.
Okay, great. Neil, quickly, because we want to take one question that's coming in.
It's going to go quick when AR solves real problems that can't be solved any other way. We're almost there, but no, it's not moving as fast because we're not quite there yet, but it's coming really soon.
Okay, that's good. Solving real problems. So imagine that the question that's been asked is, how do the developers and the technology providers for augmented reality demonstrate that to their customers that they are open and interoperable, that they've embraced this set of values that we've been speaking about today, that they are modular, and how will they know? How will they tell the world? Is there a stamp, a brand Is there a logo? What's the best message? Very quickly, Terry, what do you want to share with us?
So for the Open Geospatial Consortium, we actually have a compliance program where you can test standards. When of course, the standards has to be completed and voted on and finalized first. But there's a series of test programs that the application developer can run against and certify that their standard is compliant.
That their product is compliant with the specification. Neil, no problem. Neil, Kronos also has a compliance program, but I'm talking about public-facing, because nobody's saying that it's a specific specification. One specification makes you open and it's a whole suite of things. Tell us what you think, Neil.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would agree with Terry that a specification without conformance testing is not really worth very much, because how do you know that you've met the specification? So Kronos, we also have a conformance program. Every specification, you can get access to conformance tests, and if you call it WebGL, it's because you've passed the WebGL conformance tests. But it really comes to whether there's going to be a AR mark. I actually don't think there will be. It kind of comes back to where we started. It's AR is not. There's not going to be an AR killer app. AR is just going to be pervasive. It's going to be everywhere we use computing. There's going to be some elements of augmented reality, how we mix the real and virtual worlds, and there's going to be.
The question is more: how do you communicate that you have embraced open interoperable principles? I think that's the question.
You will have a platform, or you will use technologies that there'll be this constellation of solution points, the standards that are integral to the platform, and you will use those.
I think Neil hit it right on. I think that's the correct answer. It's the series of components that you bring together that are interoperable, and it's the components together, and it's pervasive in the society.
Any other comments, or anybody want to add anything to this question about showing or telling? Could there be a catalog? Could there be a website? Could there be some other service where if you are a proponent for interoperable AR, you could go and put your name on it?
So there's a couple of parts to that. Like, and I'm going to refer back to Neil's answer, and my answer is, so for the components, you can check out the different components, but again, you're getting down to the component level. For the Open Geospatial ARML 2.0, you'd go to the OGC website and you can check conformance of the different products, but you're just getting down to the components. For the entire package of what you're looking at, I think that's a different question, and I agree with Neil's answer.
Yeah, and I think in the end, in the hands of an end user, if the end user is trying to use perhaps some augmented reality experience on a mobile device, for example, they will try and go to and access content, a content provider, perhaps augmented reality tours around a city I'm a tourist in. It'll just be, can I access it? No. Okay, it's not conformant.
Okay, so we've got another question. That was good. Thank you, gentlemen. We've got another question from the audience. The question is, are there going to be, or are there already, some de facto AR platforms like from Apple or Google, and are they already playing in this field, and are they going to be important with augmented reality going forward? Jay, do you want to take a crack at that?
Probably the most significant things they're doing I'm not aware of, but they'll definitely be players. I still think that no matter how large a company is, they're going to benefit from a consensus standard. Things early in the process, it might start this proprietary, but I think ultimately it's going to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to take a crack at whether Google and Apple are going to get in and how they're going to do that?
Yeah, so I may say that I'm not neither with Apple or Apple or Google. But if they are not interested in AR, then we have a problem. That means big companies somehow, and both of them, knowing that they don't talk each other too much, if both of them reach the same conclusion that AR is not a field of very importance, I think that we have some problems. They may be wrong, but we may also be wrong in considering the opposite. Saying that, I think that they will play in the field. Of course, they will play in the field. Of course, each company has its own strategy to play in a particular field. We all know that if they want to play alone, any of them will be an actor that we cannot ignore. But of course, we also say the open, because we are really open, all the SDOs that are represented here, the doors are open even for companies that may consider that part of their business model is built on proprietary solution. So finally, it doesn't matter too much if they come or they don't, at least for a period of time. It will be good to have big actors, but you know, the world is not only composed by two companies, and these companies, some years ago, one of them had really difficulties, the other was not simply existing. So new companies will come, is just a matter of time. So yes, the door is open to all the companies, big or small, and it's not because someone is saying something that you have to take it for true.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think this is the best that we could imagine. It's a great, in my opinion, it's a great topic, but not everybody's passionate about standards as the panel here. And so I want to thank you, gentlemen. That's all we have time for today. And we appreciate your bringing and sharing your views with us on open and interoperable augmented reality. As a reminder, this Google Hangout is part of a larger series of events that's organized by the IEEE and hosted by myself, Christine Perret, on the subject of augmented reality. In December, we'll be continuing with an episode in which I'll be talking about augmented reality in healthcare and wellness, and how AR can bring value in clinical settings as well as for people with chronic conditions or just want to be well. For more information about upcoming events in this series, visit the IEEE Standards Association webpage entitled AR in Your Future. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.